All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started now. I know participants are still trickling in. Thank you all so much for joining the fifth webinar in the Horticulture for Development professional series on how to integrate youth in horticulture value chains. This series is focused on providing professional development for researchers, students, practitioners, and others interested in the intersections between horticulture and international development. As I've mentioned, each week webinars are scheduled every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this series runs through September 19th. Welcome back to those who have joined previous sessions, and for those who are joining for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the organizing entity of these webinars. The Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Horticulture, or the Horticulture Innovation Lab, is a global research network that advances fruit and vegetable innovations, empowering smallholder farmers to earn more income while better nourishing our communities. We are based at the University of California, Davis, and have been funded by USAID for 10 years to conduct horticulture research, and currently have about 22 projects in 14 different countries across the world. We decided to host this series because horticulture is a critical aspect of addressing malnutrition and obesity while also creating wealth, especially for women, youth, and other marginalized populations. Over the 9 webinars, including this one, we hope to pass along lessons learned and best practices and help build capacity in project management and promote the importance of fruits and vegetables globally. As some of you know, my name is Kyle Friedman. I'll be your host for this series. For those I haven't met, it's nice to be connected with you, and thank you for joining. I'm a graduate researcher for the Horticulture Innovation Lab. I previously worked at RTI International, managing large donor-funded food security and agriculture projects, and it's been a true pleasure to host this series and learn alongside you all. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our presenters. Participants are muted during the presentation. For any questions you have, please submit those in the Q&A section of your Zoom control bar. We will address questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit those along the way when they come up. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, because we do have a group of panelists for this session, which is a little bit different from our previous format, you can submit your question and also indicate the name of the presenter that you might want to address that question to, and we can make sure it gets to that individual. There will also be a brief survey at the end of the session, and we'd greatly value your feedback, so please be sure to complete that once you close out the webinar. So I'm really excited for our lineup of presenters today. As I mentioned, we are doing a panelist style, so we have 3 different presenters that have a wealth of knowledge and experience in youth horticulture and beyond. So just a brief introduction to our panelists, and then we'll get started. Our panelists include Erin McGuire, who's the Associate Director of the Horticulture Innovation Lab. We have Hilary Proctor, who's the Director of Technical Services at Making Sense. And we have Dr. John Bowman from the Bureau for Food Security at USAID. We will have each panelist present on their topic, and then we will jump into the questions for each presenter at the end. Erin, if you want to go ahead and start.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Erin McGuire. I'm, as Kyle said, the Associate Director of the Horticulture Innovation Lab. I'm really excited to be a part of this today. Of all the webinars that we're putting on in this series, this one has been the longest in the making, so I'm just thrilled to be here with my co-panelists, John and Hilary. I think this will be a nice culmination of many of the things that we've worked on and lessons learned over the 10 years that we've been focusing on this at the Horticulture Innovation Lab. And just to get started, I would say that over these 10 years, we've obviously been doing a lot of work with fruits and vegetables internationally, and I think very organically started working with younger communities in the beginning who just were attracted to the opportunities within fruits and vegetables, and over time have really been able to focus strategically and work very collaboratively and pointedly with younger communities, from children all the way to younger adults. So I hope we're able to share some of those lessons, but also I think we're really at a pivoting point where we are learning why horticulture, fruits and vegetables, particularly are such a great opportunity for this group of people. And just to set out today, I think it's important to talk about why horticulture specifically is such a great opportunity for the specific characteristics of younger populations. I don't think we've had a chance to talk about the unique characteristics of horticulture just generally, and I think that's a good foundation to launch us into the discussion that Hilary will have, where she'll connect very closely to how engaging youth is such a great, has so much potential for horticulture. And John also talking about his work in the Bureau. So just jumping right in, why horticulture? Why is it so important? Well, first, I think we all, when we think of fruits and vegetables, we think about health. And certainly that is one of the most important aspects of fruits and vegetables and consumption of fruits and vegetables. Here you can see a graph that shows that as the amount of food groups goes up, your likelihood of having an adequate diet also goes up. And you really need fruits and vegetables in order to increase those food groups. If your diet is only consisting of your staple crops, such as maize or soy, cassava, you're not going to be able to get to the number of food groups that you need to have a likelihood of having a greater, a healthier diet. So this is showing your probability of the more fruits and vegetables you eat, the more likely you are to have a healthy diet. And here in the United States, we have MyPlate. And this is what we use to describe to our population what you should eat. And you can see that half the plate is fruits and vegetables. So it's really critical that we are not only encouraging those in the United States, but those globally to eat more fruits and vegetables. It's critical to have this amount of your diet with micronutrients in order to have healthy children, healthy adults, and healthy elderly populations. And knowing that this is kind of the amount of fruits and vegetables that we need, here is a graph on really why it's so important that we're hosting this webinar, that we do interventions to promote horticulture, both production and consumption. This is a graph that shows all the Feed the Future countries at one point, their fruit and vegetable intake and the recommended intake by the FAO. So that yellow line is the recommended intake by the FAO. And you can see even when you add the vegetables and fruits together, that blue line, which is marking the total fruits and vegetables, is way below often that yellow line that is the recommended intake. So there's a huge amount of work to be done to increase production and consumption of fruits and vegetables in order to get to healthy populations. So just on the basis of health, fruits and vegetables play a really critical role. But they also increase incomes. So this is a woman that we work with in Zambia. She says, this is where the money is. And fruits and vegetables are traditionally higher value crops. They can be grown on smaller plots of land, and they allow for greater income diversification. So if you're just growing a staple crop, if something bad happens to the staple crop, you've put all of your eggs in one basket. So by growing an array of crops, including fruits and vegetables, you're really able to diversify your income stream and be a bit more resilient if something bad happens to one of those crops. And just to sort of demonstrate this, when you put in high value crops into Google, a bunch of fruits and vegetables come up. And I think the other important point on increasing incomes and creating wealth is that fruits and vegetables they grow quickly, so they can mature in 2 to 3 months. You're able to have a sellable product. So for those that have small plots of land and need quick money, fruits and vegetables are a really great avenue to do that. Whereas if you're growing staple crops, you generally may need more land and you need more time. So in summary, increasing incomes is really a great benefit of fruits and vegetables. And it comes through income diversification. It comes through the fact that they're high value crops. You can grow them quickly on small amounts of land. And finally, fruits and vegetables allow empowerment of more vulnerable populations. Traditionally in households, the cash crop is considered to be the staple crop. I think Hilary might touch on this a little bit more. Whereas fruits and vegetables present an opportunity for those without a lot of decision-making power in the household to really create their own business, to generate wealth. And this gives them a lot more power in their household, but also community as they earn income and also play a bigger role in contributing to household decisions. And really very finally, fruits and vegetables are an amazing crop. They create nutrition, wealth, they're great for vulnerable populations, but they do have challenges. They are perishable, so fruits and vegetables generally tend to need more intensive post-harvest practices, which include needed better appropriate technology. There needs to be better local capacity to enable these middle market connections and also connect the community to the market either through transportation or other services. And because fruits and vegetables, there's so many crops, it's not just maize, it's not just soy. There's a lot of information that is needed in order to create good yields. But this also presents a ton of opportunity as we think about peri-urban and urban jobs, as well as middlemen in the value chain. So all of these places are wonderful opportunities for an entrepreneur to step in and make money through the value addition or through the value add in the value chain just by getting them quickly from farm to market. So lots of entrepreneurial opportunity within horticulture. And just to summarize, before I hand it off to Hilary, who's gonna connect all the dots for us. So why horticulture? There's huge nutritional benefits of diet diversification. They're high value crops. They create wealth and they create income diversification. Entrepreneurial opportunity throughout the value chain for middle market actors and specifically for women and youth who are heavily engaged in horticulture crop production and marketing. Further, they allow for this crop diversification, which creates income diversification, and you also get these rapid crop cycles. So if something disaster happens to your farm or you need money really quickly, you can grow a horticulture crop and get profit from it within 2 to 3 months. And it's also possible to intensely farm small plots of land. So if you're not gifted with a ton of land, you just have a very small area, you're still able to grow and make a profit from it through fruits and vegetables. So with that, I will end. I guess I did want to point out right before I end that we have 2 really amazing projects that focus on youth. There's one in Guinea where we are working, it's a youth-led horticulture center where it's a place where young actors come and learn about different technologies, different best practices, turn them into businesses, and then go back out into the community to provide services that are needed within the horticulture value chain. We also have a wonderful project down in Guatemala where we're working on irrigation, and we've had great success with a youth cooperative there that is helping to lead the financing efforts. And although many of our projects have this youth component, I just wanted to highlight both of those, which you can find more information on our website. Chom, who leads the Guinea Center, is on, and I know Deborah wanted to be, but she had internet connection issues. So thank you so much. Really excited to be here and excited to hear from you, Hilary and John.
Hilary, you want to just make sure you're unmuted?
Let's see here.
There we go.
There we go. All right, excellent. Thanks there, Kyle. Appreciate it. And thank you, Erin, for that wonderful, start of the entire conversation and getting us going on it. As both Kyle and Erin said, my name is Hilary Proctor, and I'm the Director of Technical Services at Making Sense. I got asked to join today's conversation to give a bit of an overview on help with those linking of the dots, as Erin had said, because I bring into the conversation about 15 years of experience working with young people on income generating activities in rural settings in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, and primarily in agriculture. In addition to my professional experience, I also speak from a personal perspective, as I was raised in agriculture and still live in an agriculture-based household in rural Wyoming. So a little bit of a different perspective to bring into it. To get started with the conversation of kind of how do young people and horticulture fit together, I would like us to first think about our role as practitioners in this space. And one way to think about our role of connecting young people to opportunities in agriculture is to think of ourselves as being a matchmaker. And like any matchmaker, it's important to first understand the needs and wants of both parties to ensure that it is a good match. So I'll be framing this part of the discussion from that perspective of a matchmaker and really kind of trying to dive into the how and why young people in horticulture often fit together in a strong match. So to start with of horticulture. Erin dived into a lot of this in more detail, so I'll go through this at a bit of a higher level. But I think that it's important for us to really kind of think about what is horticulture and why is it a unique fit for young people and what attributes does it come in. So just really quickly for any of those that have got some question in their mind, when we talk about horticulture, we're really talking about fruits, vegetables, and flowers and ornamental plants. One way to think about horticulture is your salads, your dinner salad and your fruit salad and the different plants that are around your household, either the cut flowers on the table or those that are the decorative plants. It is these distinctions of these specific crops that do make it a specific match for young people and their opportunities and that relevancy that is there. So let me kind of dive into this a little bit further about some of the specifics and building off of what Erin had previously talked about. Horticulture crops often do need those low amounts of land, especially in comparison to staple crops. Various vegetable and fruit crops can be farmed on fractions of a hectare of land and still provide a profitable return. This is a key difference from crops like maize or sorghum or cassava that typically require a relatively larger scale of land for efficiency and profitability. Additionally, at the household level, horticultural crops provide supplemental food and nutrition, but are normally not linked to the household food security. Crops that are linked to the household for security are often focal household crops that represent prosperity and assurance of meals being provided. And this, as a result, often links them to control of household leaders. Another distinguishing characteristic of horticulture is the length of most crop cycles, as Erin had previously said. Most horticultural crop cycles are relatively short, ranging from anywhere to 2 to 6 months. Some are a bit longer on the fruit side. These crop cycles often require short and intensive efforts by their producers to establish, manage, and complete their harvest. Thus, horticulture needs a producer who's willing to engage intensively over a short period of time. And just like how Erin had early noted as well, horticulture offers the potential for many post-harvest processing activities. Some of these post-harvest activities are almost required by the crop to ensure that they safely arrive to market, while others present opportunities for opportunistic individuals who are looking to add value or engage in off-farm activities. So keeping with our matchmaking theme, I would like us to transition and talk a bit about understanding youth and their needs. To get started, I think it's helpful of understanding that youth are truly in this transitional phase. The state of being a young person is a temporary state. A key transition that young people are experiencing is that of moving from the dependence of their parents to independence as an adult. And with that comes access to resources and control of assets. Families and communities also see young people in this transition period, and their expectations of them often change and increase, while on the other hand, sometimes their willingness to transfer some of those assets and control is reluctant. So this transition period can lead to conflict between young people and their families and communities as they work to negotiate control over these assets and resources. And we see this firsthand when we start talking about access to land for young people. Youth are often also strongly linked with their families. For females, often their husbands' families, and they're seen as contributors to household income. Though they are contributors, they're often not yet the primary financial providers. And as a result of this kind of transition from contributors to providers, they're still raising in almost the decision-making ranks. Thus, young people regularly, again, don't have control over some of those household decisions and some of those other assets, especially those that are linked and thought of that are connected to the household food security. So, next let's talk about how we often hear about young people's desire or need for the quick returns. Many times this is seen as a negative element of being a young person, and that young people are often categorized as being impatient or unwilling to think in the long term. But let's unpack this a little bit and understand the why. Research has shown that the brain development process continues into the mid-20s and ends around the age of 25. This last aspect of brain development is the prefrontal cortex, which develops between the ages of 18 and 25. So why is the prefrontal cortex important? Well, this is the part of the brain that controls much of the higher order thinking skills, such as risk management, planning, and critical thinking. So during the stage of being a young adult, the brain is still developing its ability to respond to these critical adult abilities, which leaves many people with a common feeling that youth are impatient and seeking immediate returns. Not only is the state of being young transitional, but it's also the context around being a young person where there's a point of many changes in life, and many of these are significant. Young people are finishing school, they're getting married, they're moving, whether this is linked to marriage or not. They're starting employment, formal employment, informal employment, self-employment, and they're also starting families. All of these events create a lot of changes, a lot of ripple effects, and they're happening over a relatively short period of time, thus really adding to the sense and feeling of a young person's awareness of urgency and timeliness. These components often impact how a young person will gravitate and be drawn to in income generating activities that offer fast returns. So to address this sense of urgency and flux, we see young people really seeking money that comes in quickly and does not have those longer term investments. We also see them really get into a lot of diversified income generating activities. As Erin had mentioned, one of the side benefits from a lot of this diversification is really being able to capitalize on opportunity and increase a lot of resiliency. And for anybody who's interested in kind of learning more about youth and their mixed livelihoods and how it links to agriculture, I recommend the MasterCard funded report titled Invisible Lives from 2017 that focuses on youth livelihoods from rural Ghana and Uganda and really dives into some in-depth research about how this plays out in young people's lives. So making the actual match, how does horticulture and
Hilary, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Hilary, it looks like you lost your sound for a second. If you can try again.
I don't think anyone on the webinar can hear either.
Let's see, it looks like Hilary might be joining back again. Can everyone on the webinar hear us okay? I think Hilary lost sound.
Yeah, they can hear us.
Okay.
Hilary, they can't hear.
Let's see if Hilary joins back.
Thank you everyone for helping us through this.
Yeah, Hilary said her screen was loading, so let's see if she can join right now.
I guess just while we're waiting for Hilary to come back on, hopefully she'll be back on very soon, or we'll move over to John. Are there any questions out there yet, or places where, oh great, I think Hilary's back. But keep those questions coming. We're excited to answer them after the panel.
All right, can you guys hear me again?
Yes, we're good.
All right, I apologize. I'm in East Watini, and the connection does seem to go in and out every now and then. Kyle, can you confirm? I think that I lost you guys right when I kind of transitioned to this slide. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If you want to start from the beginning of this slide.
Okay, will do. So kind of from the top of talking about the crop cycles and how they allow a young, the shorter crop cycles of horticulture allow a young person to gain a lot of these rewards of their work within a timely manner. This is something that we know really appeals to young people and responds to their immediate needs and that sense of urgency that I talked about in the last slide. We also know that young people are in a testing phase in life and where they really are looking for a lot of rapid feedback. And so again, horticulture is a great opportunity with its short crop cycles to really see the impact of things like seed selection, improved methods, how decision making can really change and impact the outcomes of their yields. And so not only can we use this as an opportunity to engage young people, but we can also use it as an opportunity to engage stronger and smarter farmers that really understand a lot of the impacts of the decisions that are being made there with that short crop cycle. Horticulture is not linked to food security, and that is a good thing. While horticulture is a valuable and profitable crop and that adds a lot of nutrition into the household, it is not a staple crop. And it is those staple crops that we see that are linked with the food security at a household level, and where a household really wants to contain a lot of control on those. And so in contrast, we often see that families are more willing to release power and control to young people when they're looking to engage in horticulture crops. This results in that opportunity and decrease of tension for young people to really take control over some land and be able to be involved with the decision-making process or make those decisions themselves. Another one is the access to land. Horticultural crops are not as land as intensive as other crops, and thus match producers such as young people who have limited quantities of land. As the access to land grows over time, we often see young people diversify into other crops that are more land intensive. But as an initial match, horticulture provides a viable opportunity for them to start their production activities. Another reason why young people in horticulture is a great fit is, as Erin had said earlier, horticulture offers many of those entrepreneurial activities throughout a value chain. These really are within the packaging, processing, transportation, and they offer the on-farm and off-farm activities that a lot of young people are looking to engage and use in a mixed livelihoods approach. So from this, we can see that there is a really strong match, and there's a reason why there is a match of young people and horticulture. So when making this match, what are some of the things that we need to think about? Well, programs that apply a positive youth development approach that support the decision-making, negotiation, critical thinking, and other soft skills development really start to make some leaps and bounds in this space. Additionally, a positive youth development-based programs and approach that address the relationships of young people with their families and communities and create advocacy and access to resources for youth help ensure that young people have a success not just today, but also tomorrow in agriculture. And so when this match is made and support is provided, we can see that creating the first fit for youth in agriculture is possible around horticulture. Youth mature and make transitions into adulthood. Their skills change, their assets change, their agency, their interests, their needs. All of this is continually changing. Thus, how they engage in agriculture will also change. While young people might not spend their entire life as a horticultural producer on a small plot of land, we do know that this is a great hook and a great starting point to bring them into agriculture activities and to incorporate agriculture into their life pathways, knowing that they can grow over time into more robust producers or into other value chain players. And so with that, I will go ahead and wrap on up and turn it back on over to Erin, I think, to talk about Guatemala, or maybe straight on over to John.
We'll go straight over to John.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me, Kyle?
I sure can.
All right, should I just share my screen now, or we have to get rid of the previous talk first?
You can just share and it should share over.
Okay, so my PowerPoint is open on my screen, but I'm having trouble doing the sharing connection.
If you just hit that green button for share, it'll ask you to select which screen, and then you can pick the PowerPoint, and that should do it. There we go. It has your browser open though, so you might want to maximize the PowerPoint and hit the present from slides. Yep.
Okay, do you see mine presentation okay?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, so I'll proceed then. Thanks everybody for participating in this webinar today. I've been a USAID officer on Feed the Future since around 2011. I've worked in a lot of different areas in addition to horticulture, but horticulture is kind of one of my favorite areas. I'll be focusing on it a lot going forward in the next 5 years. And in the last year or so, I've become increasingly interested in youth engagement programming at USAID, and specifically trying to relate it to my field of expertise, which is horticulture, and then even more specifically, horticultural research. So I wanted to, in this talk, I just wanted to give a kind of an overview of how we are thinking about youth programming at USAID in general. And it's now literally a strategic imperative of the agency. We brand our interest in this area as PYD, or positive youth development. Based on what I can surmise so far, there's kind of a, when it comes to the relationship between agriculture, food security, and youth, there's more of a focus on this, on actually, you know, the adolescent age range. I'll talk a little bit about project, you know, design and youth engagement in terms of horticulture and horticultural research. And then I just want to reiterate some of the commitment we have at Bureau for Food Security, which is, you know, BFS implements Feed the Future, and that we do have a pretty serious commitment going forward. The challenge for me is that I'm essentially kind of like an older dinosaur type Aggie who's now getting interested in this new area which is youth. I'm focused more on horticultural research projects. I manage a lot of them, fund them. And the trick for me is, now that I've kind of seen the light about the importance of youth, to try to, you know, in terms of existing projects we have or upcoming projects, start to tweak things and redesign things so that youth is more built into research projects. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because these research projects don't exist in a vacuum. There's all these other projects out there that, as I do tweaking and redesigning, I have to think about relationships with these other projects. So we have many other research projects funded out of Washington, which actually do, you know, some horticulture, like our sustainable intensification lab, our small scale irrigation lab. We have a new food safety innovation lab. We'll be concerned about food safety aspects on horticulture. So I have to think about those other investments and how they deal with horticulture. And we have global youth supportive activities being run out of Washington, like the Youth Power Development Initiative, and Hilary talked about that. And then we have large horticulture value chain projects being run by missions, such as there was a series of horticultural competitiveness projects run out of Kenya. Currently, we have this M&M project in Tanzania. We've had a series of these Kisan projects in Nepal, and harvest projects in Cambodia. So these are all, very massive investments in horticulture. More lately, they've been focused on marketing and post-harvest linkages. But over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of production work. And so we have to think about how our research projects in horticulture interface with these mission projects. And I think I forgot to mention, so our major horticulture research investments right now are the Horticulture Innovation Lab run by UC Davis. And we have a major grant to the World Vegetable Center, which is headquartered in Taiwan, but has horticultural R&D projects all over the world. And then we have the IPM Innovation Lab run by Virginia Tech, which 80% of its work on pest management is on horticultural, fruit and vegetable products. And getting back to the bullets here, we have, in addition to these horticultural value chain projects being around of missions, missions actually, many of them have large multi-million-dollar just youth projects or youth engagement projects. Like there's the Advancing Youth Project in Tanzania or the KYES project in Kenya. And so the challenge kind of for me is, as I want to get my world of kind of horticultural research projects better attuned to youth, I've got to figure out how to relate to all these different categories of projects. I think preaching to the choir here, we're all very much aware of the importance of youth. I mean, I didn't really become aware of this until like maybe a year and a half ago, but this youth bulge aspect, I mean, this line just says it all. Half the global population is under the age of 30. And then when you look at these countries that are darkly shaded, literally, like 60 to 75% of the population in those countries is under the age of 30. So we're all familiar with all the doom and gloom forecasting, FAO talking about 2050, the high population that's going to be there, and then basically it looks like our gains in food productivity, food production are not going to keep up. We have to do some drastic changes in the way that we produce food in order to feed those populations by 2050. But if you look at who we're feeding or how we're producing food, youth is just critical to the whole argument. And I never even really thought about it seriously until like about a year ago. But there's kind of a conundrum because in Feed the Future, what we do, we work with some of the poorer countries, but it's actually, in terms of our clientele, the average age of the farmers is pretty high. We're working with a lot of old people as our primary beneficiaries. Farmer age in Africa, above 60. I mean, but I've just made this statement about how there's so many youth out there in Africa and Asia generally, but we work in agriculture and smallholder farmers are older. So that's kind of by default, our programs are not targeted at youth, and they benefit older farmers. So we have to kind of get out of that kind of trap and through specific youth targeting. And so these are things that I'm just becoming aware of. And, I am not a youth engagement expert, Hilary is, but I'm an Aggie who's trying to get more involved and become more cognizant of these trends. So at USAID, our kind of, we've branded our youth engagement kind of initiative as PYD, or Positive Youth Development. And when I initially started to look into this, I think this probably means we just want to get youth more gainfully employed, better success rate on jobs for youth in agriculture. And it's not that at all. It's, if you look at this definition of PYD, you don't even see the word job in there. So it's engaging youth along with their families, communities, and governments so that youth are empowered to reach full potential It's building skills, assets, competencies, fostering healthy relationships, strengthening the environment, and transforming systems. And then if you look at the kind of the USAID working definition of youth, it's anywhere from 10 to 29 years old. But as I've mentioned, what I'm sensing is in the area of food security and agriculture, kind of the working range that's more operational is actually like 15 to 24. And even this working range, we're talking about teenagers here. We're talking about adolescents. And yeah, I've worked in international ag for like over 30 years, and I've just kind of doing agriculture and doing ag research and building supply chains and market linkages. I just never even thought about dealing with teenagers and adolescents. But now I got to start to do that. And Hilary started to talk about some of these really kind of these characteristics of youth and adolescence that you have to be cognizant of as you try to do things for them. They're at a real transitional point in their lives. They essentially, you have to get into their life cycles and know how to target them. When you look at this kind of the range where in that kind of sweet spot of 10 years old up to 25, where I think most of the support in food security is occurring, these things are kind of, raging in their brains. The emotional intensity, impulse control, tendency to do self-harm, attraction to substance abuse, depression, and as Hilary mentioned, this I guess the part of their brains that's more on doing organizational things and cognition, and that's underdeveloped, and that's developing more slowly. So these things are raging and dominating. So you can't just go out and try to teach, horticultural, best practice and farm accounting to this group of people, because their brain ability to deal with that kind of stuff is being suppressed by all this other raging stuff. I don't think it's necessarily hormonal, but it's just literally a function of brain development, and you have to be cognizant of those problems. So in this slide, we want to strengthen the programming, participation of youth in our programs, youth as partners, across all AID initiatives, not just agriculture, food security, health, etc. But the important learning I've gained from working with PYD people like Hilary is that the philosophy seems to be this: you don't just engage youth directly, try to go out and quickly get them good jobs. You have to first support them, protect them, and prepare them. Then you engage them. So this is some of the religion I'm picking up and starting to ascribe to. So there is, when I first started to look at effect of youth programming and possible relationship building to horticulture, I was kind of a knee-jerk reaction. Horticulture is a great opportunity to increase their income, give them employment. And then you get into all these issues about, so how are you going to help youth start their own new farms? But there's all kind of issues with, new farm startups, whether it's, a 15, 18-year-old or whether it's a 50-year-old. There's just all kinds of challenges. But it's one way to look at it. And another way is to essentially get youth more involved. Let's say they don't own the farm, but they get more involved in larger, medium-sized farms that are more like peri-urban type farming operations that are more efficient and more productive than small holdings way out in the boondocks. Another way to look at it is essentially to get, youth away from very inefficient kind of smallholder farming and get them into this area called, non-farm household enterprises. So getting them jobs or getting them into enterprises that are still kind of involved in an ag value chain, but you're not on the farm. You're in the city, or you're peri-urban. You're working at pack houses, or you're working helping the cold chain management, things like that. So there's all these different ways to think about youth involvement in trying to get them employed and gainfully employed and active in enterprise building, at farm level or non-farm, but still involved in the farm value chain. But again, the whole premise of my talk is that that's a knee-jerk reaction to think about as we build horticulture projects that are trying to help youth. You don't get sucked into that idea of employment and income generation so quickly. You have to start thinking about soft skills building, for example. You got to start thinking about a whole range of other things. So helping them with their social skills, their self-control, their communicative abilities, their higher order thinking skills. And again, this is because like the way their brain is structured, they need a lot of help in these areas because all those problems with, emotions and whatever are dominating over cognition. So whether you're a horticultural project trying to help them out or a dairy project, you've got to start thinking about this stuff. Building healthy relationships. You have to teach them how to share power, how to show respect, how to actually have their own voice without irritating people and to become good listeners. This is very important, this whole idea of creating safe spaces. So imagine you're trying to design a horticulture project for youth, but you've got to think about safe spaces for youth. So the project maybe has to do some youth mapping to just, first of all, identify safe and unsafe spaces for youth wherever you're working, in rural Kenya or Cambodia or whatever. You have to do a series of things. And again, policies and laws to protect youth. Hopefully your projects should somehow get involved in that kind of support and keeping youth protected from violence. Creating sense of belonging. They have to essentially, whatever you do with them, they have to become more recognized and more valued in the community. So as they become horticulturalists, for example, if they may suddenly really up their game and become real income earners and all this. But if they just do that in the vacuum, and if they're not appreciated by like their parents or their village elders, as if there may even be resentment or something. But so whatever you do, whether it's horticulture or anything else, you have to make sure that you have people helping them. You have things in place that give them this better sense of kind of community belonging. This is a kind of a ladder that the youth experts use. So if you look at the highest rung of the ladder, this is kind of like the Golden Fleece. This is what you're really after. You're after, projects in youth that essentially are youth initiated and have shared decisions with adults. So these are youth-led activities. Decision-making is shared between youth and adults in the activity, kind of working as equal partners. And where you don't want to be is like maybe down by rung 3. And I've seen a lot of this where you assign your project, whether it's, again, a horticulture project or a aquaculture project or whatever, the activities tend to be led by adults, and youth are kind of consulted, and they have really minimal opportunities for feedback. But still, you may brand this as a great horticulture youth project or something, or a chicken raisin project or something like that. But again, if you get too much like tokenism built into it, it's not going to really be effective. So you have to be aware of all these different categories of the quality of the youth engagement. In terms of next steps for Feed the Future, We are, really trying to mainstream youth in what we do. It's a little bit complicated by the fact that Feed the Future, and which is run out of the Bureau for Food Security, is now being kind of restructured and reorganized. We're right in the middle of it, so we're going through these growing pains. But when we come out of it on the other side, you can trust me that youth will be much more mainstream than 6 or 7 years ago. But in terms of agency-wide commitment, we've had now for a number of years a agency youth coordinator. It's a senior position. This is Mike McCabe. This is his contact information. And at his disposal, he has this large, well-funded global task order called Youth Power Learning. It's run by Hilary's firm, Making Sense, and has subcontractors like ICRW. And it's essentially, it's our main, it's the heart and soul in terms of an actual, project with global impact that can make things happen for us in youth across, beyond just Feed the Future countries in many of our USAID countries. We have an agency youth corps. Now within the Bureau for Food Security, we actually have a full-time senior youth advisor on board. Her name is Jane Lokizuka, and that's her contact information. And then again, I'm more specialized on agricultural research projects, and I'll be working closely with Jane to try to up our game in youth in the world of the research projects. We have an internet site on youth development. We're offering more and more opportunities for our own staff to become trained, AID staff to become trained in positive youth development. The Youth Power Group is now coming up with a whole system of, specific indicators for PYD programming that need to be built into our projects going forward. Again, there's the Youth Power website. I highly recommend, if you're interested in essentially youth engagement in ag value chain work, to read this publication. It came out of the LEO project, and if you can read that and absorb it, you will really become much more fluent in what we're trying to do. And also we have an annotated bibliography that just keeps growing as multiple documents on youth engagement and in not only in agriculture and food security, but across the board in terms of the different initiatives that USAID has. We already have some youth programming activity in our research project portfolio. Like, I don't have time to describe all these projects, but you can just trust me that we have things cooking already with like the Soybean Innovation Lab, the Horticulture Innovation Lab, which I manage, our grant to the World Veg Center, Sustainable Intensification Lab, Peanut Lab, Legume Labs. When I inventoried all these labs, they are doing some significant stuff in youth already. But what I'm trying to do is now tease out the best stuff that they're doing, and in terms of the different types of youth focus in these different labs, try to bring some kind of sense of, gosh, are we all doing youth in a different way? How do we better share our experiences as our new investments come online? How do we build in youth more efficiently from the beginning in the initial design project? Because a lot of this work was essentially kind of an add-on type situation. It wasn't like built in hardcore from the start. But now that we have a senior youth advisor to help us, we can do this design work up front with much more efficiency. And then again, horticulture, research projects, they have to think in terms of what they do with youth. It isn't simply like a big contractor-led project out of a mission, which does things that are a little bit more straightforward, like capacity building and production assistance, teaching them horticultural skills or livestock raising skills. But the research projects have to think about researchable issues, researchable questions when it comes to horticulture and youth. So as the evidence confirm that explicit youth targeting can actually improve results in horticulture projects. What type of targeting youth yields the best results and why? Are there any risks if you target youth? Can you overdo it? Can youth targeting help motivate youth to remain in or return to farming? And if yes, what types of targeting may work best in horticulture? So again, in my world, we have to think about researchable issues. And there's this important interface between horticulture and youth engagement, but again, these in my world is research projects. So we have to think about researchable issues, hypotheses, testing, this kind of thing. So I will thank you for your time. I'll stop there, and then I guess we'll open it up for questions. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John, and thank you to all the panelists for your presentations and just giving us a glimpse of a lot of rich information on the topic of youth and horticulture. A reminder for participants, please feel free to send your questions in through the Q&A function. A couple of questions just to kick us off. So Erin, I'm going to address this one to you first. You talked a little bit about the complexity of horticulture in terms of post-harvest management, which obviously poses challenges and opportunities. And I think oftentimes when we talk about food waste, obviously there's a lot of different components that come into food waste and post-harvest losses. In your experience with the Horticulture Innovation Lab, what have been some ways that that you've seen post-harvest losses addressed through youth integration or new technologies, et cetera?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, one of the statistics we cite often around post-harvest loss and food waste is that we're generally losing about 40% of our food in the developed world through waste. So it gets to the consumer's plate and then people aren't eating it. But 40% is lost in much of low and middle income countries because of loss. So that's before it gets to the consumer's plate, from the time you harvest it to the moment you eat it. And that represents a huge amount of potential for consumption, of course, but that's also lost income. So, inputs, the value add of getting that food to market, those margins, all of that money is lost. That represents a great opportunity for income, again, as we've underscored, I think, a couple of times within the value chain. And so we have several projects that address post-harvest. One of our biggest projects is in Rwanda, where we're looking at several different crops and intervention points to decrease food loss. And some of there's two major strategies. One is through building capacity of the post-harvest system in country. And again, that's where there's so much entrepreneurial opportunity. So that's making sure that we're using crates instead of squishing everything into a basket, because it's really simple, low-hanging fruit in terms of information to help strengthen post-harvest systems. And that includes technology. So we've done a lot of work with appropriate technologies that have, I think, very much resonated with young people working in this sector. Certainly we've seen in Guinea where quite a few of the young ag professionals that work in that space have been drawn to those technologies and have used them to create businesses. And so that's our UC Davis chimney solar dryer, which allows you to preserve a product far after harvest by drying it. It also increases food safety. We also have the CoolBot, which has been used to aggregate produce, but essentially allows you to cool the product and keep it for longer, so you're not as held to the perishability of that product. And you're able to get a bigger price once the market glut goes down post-harvest. So So those are just some of the technologies we've worked on and really worked well for younger people trying to start businesses in kind of a new, innovative way. The other thing that I'll just quickly note is that what we haven't really touched upon is the academic route, which is also really important, and we work a lot on in terms of curriculum development for post-harvest for horticulture, and building a new wave of scientists that will come out to tackle horticulture production post-harvest issues in the future. So I think when we are trying to understand and tackle the situation around post-harvest, there's a ton of opportunity for youth, either through entrepreneurship in technologies or distribution. But then there's also these really important routes where we've worked with universities to help bring up a new generation of scientists that are also going to be tackling it from the hypothesis end.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Erin. Pivoting over to you, Hilary. I think this topic of youth migration, we haven't talked about, and obviously that could be its own topic of a webinar, but I think it's important to maybe touch on, and it's becoming an increasingly important topic as youth move towards more urban areas in search of maybe higher paying jobs or different jobs. In your experience at Making Sense, how has youth migration impacted youth and maybe family structures, and how can opportunities in horticulture maybe address that?
Thanks, Kyle. And yes, you're right. This could be a webinar all in itself, as it is a big topic. When I kind of think about youth migration into those urban areas, I think that there's two parts to it. One of them is a normal migration, and then the other part is the accelerated and amplified due to a lot of those lack of opportunities and frustration. So kind of the first off, the normal migration that happens there. Urban areas, this is where education opportunities normally are. As young people are seeking a lot of that tertiary education, even some of the secondary schools, the system pushes them towards that urban space. With that also, as John was saying, young people are young people, and there's a whole lot that is going on. And I do think that there is a natural element of a lot of young people to be drawn towards the urban areas during that point of time. I had a focus group conversation with some young men in Nigeria that were all around the age of 20. They had come into Abuja, and we talked about this. And they all said, yes, I want to be in the urban areas right now where I can make quick money, I can go out to bars, and I can meet girls, which is about the same thing as you would expect most 20-year-old young men to say. And then I asked them about, going back and, being farmers. And they said, of course, we're going to go back when we're ready to get married and settle down. And of course, we'll return back to our family farms and take that on. But right now, this is where we want to be. And I think that, that story is one that many of us can relate to as a young person, of what is it that just kind of draws in, but also how do we see that migration as a temporary state, and how do we prepare young people to migrate back to the rural areas once they go through that state, and what skills, what soft skills, what are we doing of connecting them back with their communities, creating opportunities to be able to really re-engage them. And also of what value can they return back to the farm with. I mentioned I work on and live on a ranch in Wyoming, and it's a family ranch. And the way that family ranch is structured is they've asked all of the children to leave the ranch and then make the choice to come back, and to come back with additional skills. And they do come back. They come back with more management experience, more skills, more perspective, and they're really asked to add to the assets of the ranch. And so, I think that that's one way of being able to kind of flip some of that natural migration that's happening and turn that into a positive spin for agriculture. I think the other part is that we need to look at what is really being amplified. And, it's that lack of opportunity that young people are seeing in the rural areas. And opportunity isn't just of like, oh, I can make some money, but it's the, do I have any control? Do I see any future? Do I have any ability to make decisions and to actually engage with this here in this community? And I think that oftentimes we look at engaging young people in agriculture activities that are not the right fit for them. Where we try to kind of move them into staple crop farming that requires multiple hectares of land and has these long crop cycles, and their families are not on board with this and don't want to hand over the control, and it's just not that right fit for how to create those opportunities at the local level. That do provide a lot of the decision making, the control, that ability to experiment and to be able to transition and feel like an adult instead of continually feeling like a child. And so I think that, that's another place where, again, the argument for horticulture, where we can make some of that meaningful space for young people in agriculture and also in the horticulture off farm. I mean, it's not just about the production, but there's right now there is still a majority of opportunities that are on farm, but off farm it definitely does exist, and will grow to be more so as all ag economies continue to develop. But I think that there is a lot of opportunity to build that out for young people to help reverse that, and whether if it's kind of today or tomorrow. And with that, also means really engaging families and talking about succession planning, which is something that is often left out of our conversation. Families need to be involved. How are you going to transition it over? John made the comment about, starting new farms. There aren't that many new farms to start. It's really of how do you take over a lot of what exists and build from it, and then maybe create something new. But that's a conversation that does need to be had at a family level. And how do you hand that over, and how do you hand it over responsibly?
Great. Thank you, Hilary, for addressing a larger topic in a shorter period of time. I appreciate you touching on that. This question is for you, John. It's looking back at the youth empowerment ladder that you shared, and kind of understanding that it takes many years for effective youth development. How is USAID preparing to face the time factor of youth empowerment, and just how long it may take for that development in terms of project length and resources and policy?
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, it's a good question. I can see it here. I think the prospects of the USAID kind of typical project time frame is not going to change anytime soon. They're, typically we have these 5-year projects, and a lot of year 1 is lost to startup, and a lot of year 5 is lost to close down. And so what do you have? You got like a 3-something year project. Now, dealing effectively with youth is a challenge, but I think you just have to, the more experts we have on youth in the agency now, and the more people we contract out to that have a lot of youth expertise, we'll just get better at this. And I think a real key thing is if and new projects going forward, that if we build in youth elements efficiently in the beginning, in the project design phase. If our missions have a commitment to that, if our centrally funded programming has a commitment to that, that's the way we got to do it. We can't, but if you're in a mid-project phase and you have this great opportunity to suddenly bring in youth, you've got a high-value veg project operating somewhere in Africa, and it's up and running, and okay, then you say, okay, now let's think about bringing in some youth. It's kind of too late. You're in year 2 or something. So you got to do it from the beginning. Just like, and I think our agency-wide, real serious youth, you know, commitment started around back in 2012, and now it's even more intense. And so Mike McCabe and his whole team they know how to do this. They know how to, they got a lot of experience all around the world now in terms of how to do this efficiently. And if you, like in the case of, I'll just give you the case of a particular project. So I'm working in a project in Tanzania with the World Vegetable Center, and we want to do more youth engagement in the project. So what we're trying to do is, we're not trying to do it all ourselves. We essentially are trying to team up with the local mission funded project, which is all about the soft skills and the leadership development and trying to get youth, community empowered. This particular project is even more nuanced because it's on Zanzibar, and there's all these issues with, female youth, Muslim women who've got particularly difficult times getting kind of empowered in the communities, but through intensive kind of horticulture training and other like kind of livelihoods focal points, we can start to work with them. But the mission project first has to they have to send their kind of best and brightest, the ones who have taken the soft skills training and done really well with it, and are very articulate, and they know how to gently deal with, like, religious elders and in the non-Muslim community. Those are the ones they then send to the horticulture project to give the, if they want to work, they have to make a decision. I want to work with horticulture versus something else. And once they've made that decision, and they're already kind of trained up in all the soft skills, and that big mission project has given them safe spaces and to go to, then they come to us, and we help them as best we can with, how to grow vegetables, how to promote vegetable consumption in the family for better nutrition, how to sell the vegetables, market linkages, and all that. So you can either, if you have a lot of money and you're starting from scratch, and you can design a project that does it all, but it's hard. So you have to figure out efficient ways for, like, projects on, technical assistance projects, like skills that can be offered in production and marketing and consumption through, like, the World Vegetable Center, teaming up with a large mission project, which is focused more on leadership, soft skills, this kind of thing. Now that project, they also do have some livelihoods work in horticulture and in other areas, but it's very small, and it's not, it's just not the greatest sources of expertise. So we can up the game. But again, kind of a long answer to this question, but we just have to become more efficient. We're not going to be able to suddenly, if we want to do horticultural engagement with youth, have longer projects, because youth take a longer time to deal with. We still are going to have to be constricted to the kind of the basic 5-year time frame.
Right, perfect. Thank you, John. Erin, you've touched on this a little bit, but one question that we have is just specific examples of horticulture activities that youth can engage in. And I think you talked about a couple of those, and maybe just reiterating a few of those where that are good opportunities for youth to get engaged in.
Sorry, specific opportunities within the value chain? I didn't hear.
Yeah, I guess specific examples of jobs that might be interesting to youth.
Yeah, so like I did say before, this technology development I think is very interesting to young people. And I think it's a really nice matchup between academia work and entrepreneurial work. You know, there's a lot of basic research that is done here in the US, certainly through the Feed the Future system, but really can be expanded upon and adapted for local use. And I don't think, you know, and I think the best people in the position to do things like that are those working in the community and familiar with the challenges. So being able to not just take the technologies that have already been created, but being able to develop their own or add or adapt to technologies already available to create businesses from them is a really nice way for youth to get involved along the value chain. Also, as Hilary said, I think value-added products, there's a ton of opportunity there, whether it's turning mangoes into dried products, into juice, creating jams, chili oil. We've seen, you know, everyone knows the Rwanda chili oil is so amazing. And of course, that takes financing. So you need to be able to start out small, like dried products, and build up to something that is like a juice factory or maker. But those value-added products are great because you're able to really capture a lot of the value from horticulture products and even add more and sell when there is a high price for that product. I also think in production, I think two things in production. One, indigenous vegetables or traditional vegetables, depending on where you're coming at it, is a huge market opportunity for people coming in to horticulture. We've seen a lot of success with women's cooperatives in Zambia and Kenya who are working with spider plant, amaranth, moringa. These are all huge markets that have export potential but are catching on quickly in the areas where they're culturally significant. And people are making a lot of money doing it. And then I also think that we've seen great success in creating your like niche local market. You know, certainly we're familiar with that movement here in the United States and in Europe, but it is absolutely taking on in low and middle income countries as well. One specific example, I think, from Kenya, where a woman has invested in integrated pest management strategies. She uses net houses, and she's really created a community of people that trust the product that she's creating. She uses less pesticides. It's better quality fruits and vegetables. She's also selling dried product. And every week she delivers a basket of food, very similar to a community-supported agriculture system, to folks within her area that are subscribing to her source. So there's a bunch of creative ways and opportunities, I think, to get people engaged. I know that Hilary works on this a lot too. So Hilary, I know that I've taken up a little bit of time, but if you have some examples, certainly feel free to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you already provided a lot of those examples that are out there. I think one of the opportunities that I really see is how can young people and the assets that they bring help solve agricultural challenges and problems. You know, there's a firm in Uganda that has done a great job with it of, you know, they wanted to bring technology into the agro input space and really be able to provide, you know, immediate sales and immediate connection upon consultation with farmers in rural Uganda. And so they went out and they hired a bunch of agronomists and, you know, sent them out with the smartphones and tried to get them to do this. And it didn't work at all. You know, the agronomists and that different generation, they were not picking up the technology and the mindset of the immediate sales and, you know, really trying to be able to identify a problem and create an immediate solution to it. And what they ended up doing is they ended up pivoting and hiring a bunch of young people who understood the technology, who could run with it, understood the concept, and they taught them technical agriculture, and they made them into extension agents. And they now have over 80% of their extension agents are young people. And I think that it's models like that that are out there where, you know, so often we see young people as the problem and the challenge instead of seeing them as how can they be part of the solution and what assets do they have that can bring to the table. You know, they're more willing to take risks. You know, that's part of the brain development side to it. We want them to take positive risks and not risky risks, you know, and negative risks, but how do we use that to our advantage to be able to move, you know, different seeds or different production activities out there to be able to process in a different way. You know, they are going to take up technology where, you know, other farmers are not going to. There's just a lot of ways that they can help move the industry forward if you start seeing them as that opportunistic asset in business, and how do we leverage them.
I might make a quick comment. This is John. So I think there's always been a lot of hope that one thing that might work is, you know, having young people start up these kind of like crop consulting services that could be everything from, you know, helping smallholder farmers who are pretty ignorant on kind of the science, you know, getting them to analyze the fertility level of their soils, having, you know, telling them that, oh, this soil you're working on for that crop isn't even right in the first place. You either got to change the crop or move someplace else. Spraying properly for pests and diseases, all these different kind of, you know, more technical aspects that, so I've seen this in several countries where young, you know, champions, leaders who've come out of an ag school background, they form a small business and a team that goes out and does consulting. So that's potential, but a lot of times that won't work. It just won't get traction. I think one key thing that needs to be mentioned here is I think there's a lot of opportunities talking about horticulture with off-season production. So that requires some specific expertise, how to, you know, grow crops under protected cultivation, with irrigation, with special soil treatment, so that you can grow a good whatever tomato crop or a watermelon crop, you know, off season and make a hell of a lot of money. And then maybe another opportunity for youth is when you have all this glut production, you know, all the tomatoes or all the watermelons come into production at one time, and then the price goes way down. Well, if you can do food processing, if you can just have really young, bright people figure out ways to distribute the glut better, to find market linkages that weren't found before, might be also an interesting way to get them involved. But starting up small businesses, I don't know, where you go out and even if you're in rice or wheat or something, you have a small threshers and combines that can be run around the landscape and rented out. That's kind of a business service, hopping from field to field. That's another potential area. Over.
Great, thank you, John. We're about out of time, but since you have the microphone, John, I kind of want to give you one last question, and maybe Erin and Hilary, if you have comments on it too, because I think this is an interesting one. So given a lot of the innovation labs focus on research from university institutions, one question we have is just USAID's maybe experience or examples of programming that has supported capacity building in local countries for research universities in those areas. Just has that happened? What does that look like? And what are the opportunities for developing university research capacity abroad?
I mean, I'll just quickly answer, having managed a lot of these projects. So although these are technically research projects in the Office of Agricultural Research and Policy, they typically, your typical innovation lab research activity is not 100% research. It's, first of all, most of the research is going to do is very applied. Secondly, you're probably, in terms of pure research, is maybe only 70%. Maybe the 30% is actual, training and capacity building. HortLab is working, hands-on with certain universities to just do the curriculum upgrading. That's not really research at all, but they're upgrading researchers in premier ag universities. So yeah, innovation research labs, they do capacity building.
Great, perfect, thank you. Erin, Hilary, any final comments before we close?
Oh, I would just say that I do think it's one of the more important missions, and something that I'm very proud of USAID for supporting, is building the capacity in country to tackle these issues. And the support that we give the universities, I think, is really critical, even if it's not basic research, but it's promoting a ton more basic research than we could ever handle by encouraging the next generation. So yeah, and just really happy to be here and excited to have learned from everyone today. And I loved all the questions coming in. I hope that we get a chance to address them at some point. Feel free to email us as well.
Perfect.
And this is, oh, sorry, Kyle.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just kind of a last sort of thought that I have on my side is a recognition of where we are and our steps forward. As John said, that he's recently become aware of the role of youth and the importance of youth, and that is momentum that's still coming. And I have a lot of admiration for John and for your colleagues of really getting on board and really figuring it out. And diving into it with so much honesty and really kind of working to make this space more meaningful. A chief of party said to me one time, he said, "Youth is where gender was 20 years ago." And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from that gender space of integration and to help us accelerate that, and so that we get young people and into agriculture and into other livelihood opportunities, and we start to provide those meaningful options for them moving forward, and really start providing some of that those meaningful spaces for that youth bulge. And so things like this I think are really great, and I'm just really thrilled to be part of them, of helping to advance that conversation one notch forward.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists for their presentations. I certainly learned a lot during this discussion, and I hope you all did as well. Before we close, just a reminder, if you can complete that brief survey at the end, we'd appreciate that. Also, next week's webinar is on how to host an effective agricultural extension workshop. I'm looking forward to learning more about that, and I know that'll be really helpful for many of our colleagues abroad and working in horticulture. That'll be next Thursday, August 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, we'll continue to post the recordings of all the webinars and the resources on our website, so please continue to check back there. Thank you all again, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.